Hello, champions, and welcome back to PW English. And I'm your Diksha ma'am. So, here we are going to start with the chapter Chemical Control and Coordination. So, guys, this is really simple and most interesting chapter. According to me, here you're going to know about a very different system of your body that runs on the chemicals, and these chemicals are known as hormones. So, let's get started. So before that, let's memorize what were endocrine glands. So endocrine glands were ductless glands. What were these? These were ductless glands. That means they do not have ducts. They do not have ducts. So if they don't have any ducts, how they're going to pour the secretion out? For example, if this is your endocrine gland, this is any endocrine gland and it's ductless, and this gland is going to secrete something, and that something is known as hormones. So its chemicals are known as hormones. So endocrine glands these endocrine glands, they have certain message. What do they have? They have certain message, and they want this message to move to some other organ. They want this message to move to some other organ, which is the target organ. For example, this is the target organ. So these endocrine glands, they have a message, so they are going to send them messenger, and these messengers are known as hormones. So we say that these hormones, these are primary messengers, because these are the one which carry information. That's why you call them as primary messenger. Primary means the one which is important, and which is the one who got the information for the very first time. So they got the information for the very first time from the endocrine gland. So these hormones want to send this information to the target organ. So how they're going to move from this to that? So they are going to move through the blood circulation. So these hormones, they're going to enter into your blood, and then they will enter into the target organ, and this is how the target organ will perform any function. I give you a very simple example. Like we have here endocrine gland, which is pancreas, and pancreas will secrete insulin. The function of insulin is to go to the liver. If I say this is the liver, and the function of insulin there is to form glycogen from glucose, right? So the message of endocrine gland, which was carried by the insulin, it moves to through the blood to the target organ, and now the target organ will perform its function. So that's why you call hormones as primary messengers. These hormones have other certain characters, like what? You call them as primary messengers or intercellular messenger, because they are going to send information from one cell to another. So you also call them as the intercellular messengers. These hormones, they are secreted in trace amounts. Trace means very small quantity, very small amounts. These are non-nutrient. What is a non-nutrient? It will not act as a nutrient. They will rather act as someone who is giving message. Neither they are going to act as a catalyst. Catalysts are enzymes. They are just going to act as some messengers which are giving information from one cell to another. So, what are nutrients? Nutrients like your glucose. Whenever you eat glucose in your body, it is going to, get oxidized and give you energy. But here, these are non nutrient. That means they're not going to undergo oxidation, they're not going to undergo combustion and form energy, right? So, these are non nutrient. What are these? These are intercellular messengers, or known as primary messengers, and they are secreted in the trace amounts. And this is what are the very, very important characters of your hormones. Let's move further and talk about the hypothalamus and pituitary gland. So you have a lot of glands in your body. For example, in brain you have hypothalamus, pituitary, and pineal gland, right? In the neck region you have thyroid and parathyroid. Near the heart you have thymus. Down there beneath the stomach you have pancreas, and then down or above the kidney you have adrenal gland, and then down the pelvis you have testes or ovaries, depending upon what sex you are. If you are a male, you are a boy, you have testes. If you are a female, you have ovaries, right? So let's talk about the hypothalamus and pituitary gland. Hypothalamus and pituitary, they have a lot of things in common. First, they are the part of the brain, right? So first of all, I'm going to start with the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus Where it is found? It is found in the basal part, or it is present in the basal part of diencephalon. What is a diencephalon? We have done the neural control there. Uh, if you have done the neural control in the brain, the forebrain has three parts: olfactory lobes, diencephalon, cerebrum. So this is a part of a diencephalon, right? And then if I talk about pituitary gland, where it is present, it is present in the sella turcica of sphenoid bone. What is a sella turcica? Sella turcica is a depression in the sphenoid bone where your pituitary is present. So it's present in the sella turcica of sphenoid bone. Right? And both are present in the brain. So if both are present in the brain, their origin will be ectodermal. Fine. Okay, let's move further and talk about its other feature. So here we have a hypothalamus and pituitary, which are present, adjacent to each other or attached to each other. If I say this is the hypothalamus, and down there is present pituitary like this, and pituitary is attached to hypothalamus via this stalk-like structure which appears like a stick, you call it as infundibulum. What do you call it as? Infundibulum. So what is infundibulum? Infundibulum is a stalk-like structure, and this one connects your hypothalamus. What is this? This is hypothalamus with the pituitary, and this one is pituitary gland. Pituitary gland, if you can see, it has two parts. This one is anterior pituitary, also known as adenohypophysis. Adenohypophysis. And then we have this pituitary, which is the posterior pituitary. Posterior pituitary, also known as neurohypophysis. So if you have seen one thing in common, the hypophysis term is common in both the parts of the pituitary. The word hypophysis says it's pituitary, or we can say the another name of pituitary gland is hypophysis or the master gland. Why you call it as a master gland? Because earlier when hypothalamus was not discovered, it was supposed that pituitary is the one that controls all the functions of your body. But later on it get to know that, I will also letting you know in the later section, that hypothalamus also controls the function of pituitary gland. So that's why the hypothalamus got the name master of master gland. So hypothalamus is also known as master of master gland. All right. So why it is known as a master of master gland? Let's see. So if I say this is hypothalamus, and hypothalamus is an important part of the brain, so it will be carrying a lot of nuclei. Now, what are these nuclei? Nuclei are the group of cell bodies of the neuron. If you remember the structure of neuron, the neuron have two parts. One are the cell body, another is the axon. And the cluster of cell body in the central nervous system is known as a nuclei. So here I have a lot of nuclei like this. These nuclei as axon, they move downwards in the posterior pituitary like this. Whereas the axon of these nuclei do not move down the pituitary, and it ends here only. Fine. These are nothing but these are neurons. So this portion, which is a collection of cell body, is a nuclei. This is also the nuclei. So these portion of nuclei, they secrete hormones, two hormones which get moved down through the axon and they get stored in the posterior pituitary. So these nuclei, they will produce two hormones. These hormones, they will move down through the axon and they will get stored in the posterior pituitary. Okay, so they secrete hormones that get stored in the posterior pituitary. Okay, now then we have these section of nuclei. These are the nuclei. They will secrete hormones which are of two type. Secrete inhibiting and releasing hormone. Inhibiting and releasing hormone. Now what's the difference? You know what? These are two different, functions of hypothalamus. One is hypothalamus is producing hormones and it letting the posterior pituitary to store it. Fine. And the name of these hormones are ADH and oxytocin. So ADH and oxytocin, we say they are produced by hypothalamus, but they get stored in the posterior pituitary. So if I talk about these nuclei, they're going to produce certain hormones which will move down to the anterior pituitary through blood vessels, just like every hormone does. And then right here in the anterior pituitary, the anterior pituitary will secrete its own hormone. Fine. So hypothalamus is like a commanding center. It will tell the anterior pituitary whether to secrete a hormone or not. For example, if I say the anterior pituitary have two areas. It has two areas. One is pars distalis and another is pars intermedia. Okay, so it has two areas. One is pars distalis. This area is pars distalis. And this is pars intermedia. As you can see, both are fused to each other. Right? So this pars distalis has certain cells and this area will secrete hormone like growth hormone. Okay, I'm giving you one example. For example, pars distalis secrete the hormone growth hormone. Okay. So if the commanding center secretes growth hormone releasing hormone, it will come down to the anterior pituitary's pars distalis area and the growth hormone will be secreted. If the hypothalamus secretes hormone, growth hormone, inhibiting hormone, then again this hormone will move down through blood vessels to the pars distalis and the growth hormone will not be secreted. So in a way, one portion of hypothalamus is secreting hormones which is acting as a commanding center for the secretion of anterior pituitary. But this also tells us that anterior pituitary has its own hormones. Another center where nuclei are producing hormones which move down to the posterior pituitary and get stored there. And this tells us that posterior pituitary is not a true endocrine gland because it is not producing its own hormone. Right? Also, that's the area in the posterior pituitary as well where the hormones get stored. So you call it as pars nervosa. All right. So we have some areas. Do not get confused here. It's just small cluster of cells or the areas where the hormones are present or they are getting secreted. All right. Okay. So now if you can see, these are blood vessels that are moving towards to the pituitary gland, right? So these are the blood vessels of portal system. So what are these? Blood vessels of portal system. Blood vessels of portal system. Now, what is a portal system? First of all, let me make it clear to you. So, what is a portal system? Let me make it clear to you. So, portal system is a type of circulation in your body, like a blood circulation. In a normal organs like kidney, in a normal organs where there is no portal system. Okay, what happen is from an organ, the blood, the deoxygenated blood, it directly moves towards the heart, right? Like you have read that the right side of heart receives the deoxygenated blood from the body, just like that. Okay, but what happen in a portal system? What happen in a portal system? Organ 1 will send its deoxygenated blood not to the heart, rather to the organ 2, and then organ 2 will send the blood to the heart. So here it's a portal. You are giving a bypass, right? You are not letting that organ to get the blood directly to the heart, but you are bypassing it from the another organ. What's the reason? We have two type of portal system in our body. One is hepatic portal system. In hepatic portal system, the first organ, which is intestine, it gives its deoxygenated blood to the liver, and then the blood moves to the heart. What's the need here? Because an intestine might be containing a lot of toxic substances, like if someone has consumed alcohol, so you need to detoxify it. So if you send it directly to the heart, the entire body will get that toxin, but you don't want it. You want that product first to get detoxified. Similarly, another system is present in between hypothalamus and pituitary, that is hypophyseal portal system, in which hypothalamus first send the blood to the pituitary gland, and then pituitary will send the blood to the heart. What is the reason here? Because we want hypothalamus hormones, which are inhibiting and releasing, which are controlling the pituitary gland, should go directly to the pituitary. If it doesn't go directly to the pituitary, if it should be another thing like a normal organ, if hypothalamus is sending blood directly to the heart, it would have been the way like first the hormones will travel to the entire body and then it will go to the pituitary. But you don't want it. You want the function to be quick. So what nature has given? Nature has destroyed this route, rather it has formed this route, so that the thing get directly to the pituitary. If the route would have been this one, first the blood will go to the heart, from heart it will go to the body, from body from then to the heart, and then to the lungs, not to the body, then to the lungs, and then it would have been gone to the pituitary. But you don't want this, a large circle or a large type of circulation. So what they did, they just cut off all these things and they give a bypass from where the blood first will go to the pituitary and then to the heart, so that all the hormones will go to the pituitary first, then to the heart. All right, so that's a portal system. So that blood vessels, they belong to the hypophyseal portal system. Okay, so now what are the various inhibiting and releasing hormones? Let's see what are the various hormones of hypothalamic hormones. So first we'll talk about the inhibiting and releasing hormones. Inhibiting and releasing hormones. So the first one, as I've told you, growth hormone, inhibiting hormone. Likewise, we have growth hormone, releasing hormone. Okay, so this one is going to inhibit growth hormone release, and this is going to release the growth hormone. Likewise, we also have inhibiting and releasing hormone for prolactin. So we have prolactin releasing hormone, we have prolactin inhibiting hormone. So what is a prolactin? It's the hormone of pituitary gland. Similarly, we have another hormone, GnRH, growth, sorry, gonadotropin releasing hormone. Gonadotropin releasing. Alright, so these are certain examples of inhibiting and releasing hormone. Likewise, we have some other hormones as well. But first, let's talk about the another type of hormones. What were these? ADH and oxytocin, the hormones that get stored in the posterior pituitary. ADH is also known as vasopressin, that you must have done in the excretory system. This is the antidiuretic hormone. What is diuresis? Diuresis means formation of dilute urine, the urine that contains a lot of water in it. Fine. So here this hormone, what it does, it helps in the reabsorption of water and electrolytes from distal tubule. What are these distal tubule? Renal tubules, the one in the kidney. Okay. So if it is going to reabsorb water, the water in the urine will be less, and hence it will prevent diuresis. What is diuresis? Formation of dilute urine. Then I have oxytocin. Oxytocin is known as birth hormone or milk ejecting hormone or milk ejecting hormone. So it has two functions. One, it helps in the delivery of the baby. And second, milk letdown. Why it is known as birth hormone? You know, whenever the baby is coming out from the mother's uterus, this hormone will let the contraction of the uterine muscles. As a result, the baby will be pushed outside. Whereas it is known as milk ejecting hormones because it is going to squeeze the ducts of the mammary gland. You know, mammary gland's breast, which produces milk in female, it is going to squeeze the mammary gland's ducts so that milk will come out. So that's why it's known as birth hormone and milk ejecting hormone. Let's talk about the hormones of the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland's hormone. These are very important, so listen to me very carefully. Pituitary gland's first hormone is a growth hormone. Is a growth hormone. All right. Okay. So we have this growth hormone. It helps in the growth of bones. Helps in the growth of bones and limbs. It also increases blood sugar. That's why you call it as, it's the diabetogenic effect. That means, if someone has diabetes, what do you say? The blood sugar has been raised. Okay, so here this hormone is also doing the same thing. But the purpose is so that every cell of a body should get the glucose or sugar. All right. Otherwise, it also helps in protein synthesis, so that more protein is formed and more body should be strong. The target cells of this growth hormone is your entire body. Target cell, entire body. It is also known as somatotrophic hormone. Somato means every cell of your body except your germ cells. What are germ cells? The gametes, your sperm and ova. So whatever cells except the germ cells are known as somatic cells. Okay. So there are certain disorders associated with this hormone. What are these disorders? If there is increase in growth hormone before puberty, it will lead to gigantism. In gigantism, the person will show the symptom that its height will be abnormally increased. If the growth hormone decreases before the puberty, it will, the organism or the person will be having dwarfism, in which the height will be very abnormally, it has not been grown. They have short stature, short height, right? And if the growth hormone increases after puberty or in the old age or in the adulthood, then it will lead to acromegaly, which can be fatal as well. Fatal means it can lead to death if it is not spotted, right? Because acromegaly, in acromegaly, the person's height will not be increased, because after certain age the height does not increase because the growth plates of your bone gets closed, so other organs will start to grow. As a result, this can lead to the death of organism. All right, next hormone here we have is prolactin. Prolactin hormone is a hormone that helps in the formation of milk. All right, so now there are two things. One is a hormone that leads to the formation of milk. That means milk synthesis. That's prolactin. One which is letting the milk let down, through which the milk is coming out, is oxytocin. Then we have TSH hormone. TSH is thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone is a hormone that leads to, or that stimulate the growth of thyroid gland. Similarly, we have another hormone, like we have a hormone that leads to the growth of thyroid gland and secretion as well, growth and secretion. So whatever hormone it is secreting, it will TSH will control its secretion. If I say the hormone of thyroid is thyroxine, so the TSH will go to thyroid, leads to its growth, as well as it will also tell the thyroid gland to secrete the thyroxine hormone. Similarly, we have hormone ACTH for adrenal cortex. ACTH, adrenocorticotropin hormone. Like in kidney, we have two areas, the cortex and medulla. In adrenal cortex, we also have two areas, the cortex and medulla. Right? So here, this hormone will lead to stimulate the growth and secretion of adrenal cortex. Then we have gonadotropins. What do we have? We have gonadotropin. What are gonadotropins? The FSH and LH, they are collectively known as gonadotropin. What's the full form? FSH is follicle stimulating hormone. Whereas LH is luteinizing hormone. Whereas LH is luteinizing hormone. Now, what happened in female? The FSH helps in the growth of ovarian follicles, whereas LH helps in ovulation, rupture of Claphian follicle. Right? You know, in female, the follicles are present in which oocyte is there, which is going to form the ovum. So all these are going to mature and they get mature in the presence of FSH. When they get mature, the LH will rupture them and they will free the oocyte so that it will become the ovum. Similarly, in males, the FSH helps in spermatogenesis and the LH helps in secretion of testosterone. Secretion of testosterone. All right, so that's the hormones of your pituitary glands, which came from pars distalis. Now let's talk about the hormones from pars intermedia. So pars intermedia secrete one hormone, that's MSH, melanocyte stimulating hormone. Melanocyte stimulating hormone is the hormone which leads to or which stimulate the melanocytes. What are melanocytes? The cells present in your skin. There are cells which are present under your skin. These are melanocytes. On exposure to UV light or under the influence of MSH, they are going to produce a pigment known as melanin that gives color to your skin. If I say my skin is dark, that is due to the presence of much melanin in my skin. And this melanin is secreted by a cell which is melanocyte. And melanocyte works under the influence of hormone from pituitary, that's MSH. So MSH, what it does, it stimulates melanocyte of skin and helps in secretion of melanin pigment. Secretion of melanin pigment. All right. So that's it about the pituitary gland. Let's talk further about the another glands, and that's your pineal gland. So pineal gland is a very small gland in the brain. Small gland where it is present beneath the hypothalamus or below the hypothalamus. This is a gland that secretes the hormone melatonin. Melatonin is a very important hormone because it controls the circadian rhythm or biological clock. What does it mean? So your body has its own clock. right? Literally, your body has its own clock, and that runs on the daylight and night. So when you have a lot of light exposure, there will be inhibition of melatonin. There will be inhibition of melatonin, and as a result, you will not be get able to sleep. So your sleep and wake cycle, your hunger cycle, every cycle includes under your biological clock. In fact, the female's menstrual cycle comes under the rhythm of a biological clock, right? So we have this hormone melatonin. This controls your sleep and wake cycle. Sleep and wake cycle. In female, as I've told you, menstrual cycle. As a result, if this system is affected, this can also lead to the, or if I say, if someone do not have a better biological clock, their immunity can even be degraded. Fine. So because melatonin also enhances your metabolism and immune system, it also affects the metabolism and immune system. That's why we say it's very important to sleep on a particular time and have a good sleep of 7 to 8 hours, right? So why today, nowadays, kids say, I'm not able to sleep till 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, right? Why? Because they keep on using the mobile phone, and that mobile phone has artificial light, and that light enters to your brain, it hits your pineal gland, and the secretion of melatonin, it decreases. So if you have higher level of melatonin, this is definitely going to give you a good night's sleep, right? So this melatonin inhibited by light, inhibited by light. Okay. Okay, otherwise it also helps in the dispersion of melanin pigment, dispersion of melanin pigment. So these are some of the functions which are performed by your hormone melatonin that comes from the gland, which is pineal gland. Now let's talk about the another gland. That's your okay. Before thyroid, let's start with the thymus. That's your thymus. So if I talk about thymus, its location is quite important because a lot of students, they get confused. Oh my God, where is it present? It is present between lungs, ventral to aorta, and ventral to aorta. For example, these are my two lungs, and here I have heart. And on the heart, I have this blood vessel, which is aorta. Okay, if this is not visible, it's going to camouflage. And this is aorta. So if something is present here, that's ventral side. If something is present behind, it's dorsal side. So my thymus is present just right here, in between two lungs and ventral to aorta. This is my heart. This is my blood vessel aorta. So it's present ventral to aorta. Okay. So this gland, it produces the hormone, that's thymosin. This gland has a very important role to play in immune system. So that's why you call it as throne or school of immunity. So what does this hormone do? This hormone, it has two effects on two different cells of immune system. One are the T cells, another are the B cells. If you remember, if you have read WBCs are of different type. White blood cells are of different type, and one category is lymphocyte. The lymphocyte are of further of two type, B lymphocyte and T lymphocyte. The T cells, how do they function? T cells are so much important cells of your immune system. Whenever any microbe comes, these cells are going to attack on these microbe, and they're going to directly kill it. They're going to directly kill it. So any immunity in which cells are directly killing the organism is a cell mediated immunity. So what this thymosin does is it lets or it helps in the T cell maturation or differentiation. It will let the T cell to mature and differentiate, and hence it is helping in enhancement of cell mediated immunity. What was a cell mediated immunity? The immunity in which the cell is directly, the immunity in which the cell is directly killing the pathogen. But there is another type of cell, which is B cell. This thymosin tells B cell to divide, so it helps in B cell multiplication. Why? Because whenever B cell divide, it leads to the formation of antibodies. formation of antibodies, which are not a cell but proteins, glycoproteins. These are soldiers. What are these? These are soldiers. So B cell is not directly contacting with the pathogen, it is sending soldiers to kill the pathogen. So any immunity in which antibodies are killing the pathogen, that's humoral immunity. That's humoral immunity. So thymosin, which is a hormone of thymus, it is enhancing both humoral and cell-mediated immunity. Cell-mediated, where T cells are getting mature and differentiated, and now T cell will directly kill the pathogen. Humoral, in which antibodies directly kill the pathogen. B cells, they are not killing the pathogen, they are producing the antibodies, right? Okay, so this was about the thymus. Let's now talk about very important gland, that's thyroid gland. So next we have the thyroid gland. If someone asks you about the location of thyroid gland, it is present around the trachea. Present around the trachea. Right? So it's a bilobe shaped gland. It's a bilobe shaped gland. So that means it will be having two lobes, and both the lobes are connected with the help of this connective tissue, and you call this connective tissue as isthmus. What do you call it as? You call it as isthmus. What do you call this connective tissue? You call it as isthmus. Now let's see inside these lobes. Inside these lobes are present small well-like structure, and you call it as follicles. What are these? These are follicles. Inside the follicle is present the colloid, and this colloid is present the thyroxine hormone. So in this colloid is present, it contains hormones. Now, what hormones does it contain? It contains the hormones which are thyroglobulins attached to the iodine. So, these hormones are of two types. One is T3, another is T4. T3 is triiodothyronine, and this is tetraiodothyronine. So, out of these, T4 is the most abundant one, so you call it as thyroxine. But this one is the most potent one. It's content or the quantity is low, but it's more potent. It works better than T3, but its concentration is more in the blood, so that's why it has been given the name thyroxine. So what these are made up of? They are made up of two things. One is thyroglobulin, which is attached to iodine. Thyroglobulin is a part which is derived from amino acid, which is tyrosine. It has been attached with the iodine. Iodine is important because it helps these thyroglobulin to move out of the follicles and enter into the blood vessel, right? So what's the function of iodine? It helps hormone to move out, to move out from follicles. Now, what are the function of these T3 and T4? What are the function of thyroxine? First of all, it controls the BMR, which is the basal metabolic rate. Your body's metabolism is it's moving in a particular rate. You call it as basal metabolic rate. So if someone has higher metabolic rate or a good metabolic rate, its body will be thinner. If it has a very low metabolic rate, the body will be it's a little fattier. Okay, then it also helps in erythropoiesis. What is erythropoiesis? Formation of RBCs, that's erythropoiesis. Also, it controls menstrual cycle in female. It helps in water and electrolyte balance. Water and electrolyte balance. It also helps in cell differentiation. Cell differentiation. So these are some functions of thyroxine hormone. Now there are some other set of or one type of another hormone that's secreted by the cells which are present here between the follicles. So there are also certain cells which are present between the follicles. These cells are known as C cells, and they secrete hormone which is thyrocalcitonin. Thyrocalcitonin. The function of thyrocalcitonin is to decrease the blood calcium. So that's why you call it as hypocalcemic hormone. Hypocalcemic hormone. So how it decreases the blood calcium? It will pick up the calcium and as well as phosphate from the blood, and it will paste it on the bones, and you call it as mineralization of bones. That we'll be discussing in the calcium homeostasis as well. Now, what are the disorders related with the thyroxine? Let's see. So, disorders. So, hormonal disorders are simple. Either the concentration of hormone can decrease or the concentration of hormone can increase. You know, as we have discussed in biomolecule, everything or every, every nutrient or anything or any chemical in your body, any biomolecule in your body or especially in blood, is present in a fixed concentration. If its concentration changes, that can lead to disorders. For example, there is a range of thyroxine hormone that needs to be there in your body, but sometimes it decreases. So when it decreases, the disorder is hypothyroidism. Hypothyroidism. And when it increases, you call it as hyperthyroidism. So, in which cases a person can have hypothyroidism, or what are the different case scenarios or causes? First, if there is decrease in iodine in the diet, it can lead to a disorder known as goiter, in which there is a swelling of a neck. Why there is a swelling? As I've told you, iodine helps these thyroxine hormone to move out of the follicle. If there is no if there is no iodine, these colloid will get filled up with this thyroglobulin, and hence they will increase in the size. Then, if there is less thyroxine in mother during pregnancy, as I've told you, this hormone leads to the cell differentiation, and in pregnancy a very important event is cell differentiation, because the cells will mature and then that will lead to the formation of baby and its organ. If somehow female is pregnant and she has less thyroxine, this can lead to cretinism in children. That means the child will be having a lot of issues like mental and physical disabilities. Mental and physical disabilities. Then, if there is less thyroxine in adult, that is myxedema. And these usually occurs to a female, and that's why the female who have hypothyroidism, they face irregularity in the menstrual cycle as well. Then we have hypothyroidism. It can occur in two cases. One, if someone has a cancer of thyroid gland, the concentration of thyroxine will increase. Second, if there is exophthalmic goiter. Exophthalmic goiter or Graves' disease. In exophthalmic goiter or Graves' disease, this is an autoimmune disorder. This is an autoimmune disorder in which there is excessive production of the thyroxine, and this leads to excessive thinning of body. If someone has a lot of thyroxine, it's BMR, that's basal metabolic rate, will be very higher. Metabolism is working as hell, higher than anything, and the person will deplete everything faster, and the person will be thinner, and there will be a lot of other body changes will also occur, like shivering, confusion. These type of symptoms can be seen in a person with the Graves' disease. Why you call it as exophthalmic goiter? Ophtha means eye, exo means outward. So the symptom is protruding eyes. The person with Graves' diseases have protruding eyes, right? So these are the disorders related with thyroid. Let's talk about the parathyroid gland. The parathyroid gland is made up of 4 small yellow lobes, and these are present on thyroid gland. All right. So if I see thyroid gland from behind, if this is trachea, if this is trachea, I'm seeing or looking at it from ventral side. Okay, sorry, from dorsal side. I will see that on the thyroid gland are present small yellow ball like structure, and these are parathyroid gland. What are these? These are parathyroid gland. These are what? Parathyroid. Okay. So what is the function of parathyroid gland? It secretes the hormone, and the name of the hormone is PTH, or parathormone, or parathormone. So the function of this hormone is to increase blood calcium. So this is hypercalcemic hormone. Now, how does it increases the blood calcium? For that, you need to understand calcium homeostasis, or regulation of calcium in our body. So what happens is, whenever there is increase in blood calcium, the calcitonin will be released from thyroid gland, and calcitonin will lead to mineralization of bones. Now, what is mineralization of bones? That is, you're going to paste the calcium and phosphate on the bones from the blood. Okay. Now, this will lead to decrease in blood calcium. This is a function of the calcitonin. Now, by looking at the decreased level of blood calcium, now PTH will come. Now PTH's function is to increase the blood calcium. Now, how it is going to do? The calcitonin was decreasing the blood calcium by mineralization of bones. What is mineralization of bone? This is a bone, and this is a blood vessel. So what this calcitonin does is, it will take all the calcium ion from the blood and it will paste it on here. Okay. So PTH does the opposite. What it does it, if this is the bone, it will take its calcium and put it in the blood. So that's the demineralization of bones. Okay, so first function of PTH is demineralization of bones, and this is how it is going to increase the blood calcium. Second is, it will tell the renal tubules of kidney, whatever calcium you have and you are going to throw it in the urine, just take it back and put in the blood. Because anything that gets reabsorbed from renal tubule, it goes into the blood, right? So it will tell the renal tubule for a reabsorption of calcium ions from renal tubule. Also, it will tell the kidney to activate vitamin D. Why they want the vitamin D's activation? Because vitamin D is very much important for absorption of calcium from the gut. For example, you drank milk, right? And that milk has calcium. It goes into your gut. In gut, the absorption will take place, right? So here in the gut, if vitamin D is present, the absorption of calcium will take place. If there is no vitamin D in the gut, no absorption of calcium will take place. So that's why it needs to activate vitamin D, because vitamin D is the vitamin that gets produced in your body, and it will lead to the absorption of calcium in gut. So all these things will increases the blood calcium level, right? So this cycle, it goes on in your body until it achieve a constant concentration of calcium in your blood, right? So that's the calcium homeostasis. Let's talk about adrenal gland. Adrenal gland is a gland which is also known as suprarenal gland. Ad or supra means above, renal means kidney, because this gland is present above kidney, so that's why its name is adrenal or suprarenal. So if I see the structure, or I see the shape of this gland, it's a triangular shaped gland. Inside it is a present area which constitute around 25% part, that's medulla. So we say that the adrenal glands have two area. One is the adrenal medulla and another is the adrenal cortex. Alright. So the cortex is the outer portion, and cortex is around 75% and medulla is around 25%. Cortex secretes hormones on stimulation of what? ACTH from pituitary. It secretes It secretes corticoids. So these hormones are collectively known as corticoids. Whereas medulla secretes hormones which are known as catecholamines. Catecholamine. Right? So catecholamines or their name is epinephrine or norepinephrine. So epinephrine or norepinephrine, they are collectively known as catecholamines. Epinephrine or norepinephrine are also known as adrenaline or noradrenaline. All right. So to epinephrine, I can also call it as adrenaline. To norepinephrine, I can also call it as noradrenaline. And collectively, they are known as catecholamines. So here I have three layers from outside to inside. The outermost one is zona glomerulosa. Zona glomerulosa. The middle one is zona fasciculata. And the innermost one is the zona reticularis. Okay. So here this one is zona glomerulosa. Zona glomerulosa secretes the hormone known as mineralocorticoids. The function of mineralocorticoid is the reabsorption of sodium ions from renal tubule and secretion of potassium ions. Right? So the function is it wants sodium ion to take back, but it is throwing the potassium ion into the urine. Then we have the middle layer, which is zona fasciculata, and zona fasciculata secretes glucocorticoid. Right? The example is cortisol. Similarly, the example of mineralocorticoid is aldosterone. What's the example of mineralocorticoid? Its example is aldosterone. So I'm writing it here. Aldosterone. Okay. All right. So what is the function of cortisol? Since its name suggests it's a glucocorticoid, so it is going to, do some functions related to glucose. Fine. So its main function is to increase the blood sugar. So it will lead to gluconeogenesis. What is gluconeogenesis? Gluco means glucose, neo means new, and genesis means formation. You're going to make glucose from lactic acid, from amino acid. Okay. It also leads to lipid breakdown, which is lipolysis, proteolysis. It also helps in erythropoiesis, which is formation of RBCs. It also performs the function of cardiovascular system. All right. It also performs the function of cardiovascular system, and very important, this cortisol. It also acts as immunosuppressant. Immunosuppressant. What is immunosuppressant or anti-allergic? Anything, guys, anything which is going to suppress your immune system. It's very important, cortisol. Somehow if you get an allergy or infection, and your immune system will go crazy, right? It will forms a lot of antibodies, a lot of immune cell. As a result, these cells can also destroy your body. Yes, these cells can also destroy your body. So their cortisol will come and tell the immune system, it's fine, you have allergy, but calm down. We don't want to destroy our own body. So that's why it's also important. They are going to suppress the immunity, or they are anti-allergic. So anything that's go havoc in the immune system, they will suppress the immunity so that they should not damage our body cells. All right. And the innermost layer, this one, is your zona reticularis. Zona reticularis secretes the sex corticoids like androgen. Androgen, it like control facial hair. Okay, so any female who has highly expressive reticularis layer or high concentration of androgen. This leads to the growth of the facial hair, right? So that's why we say that females also have androgen, small amount of androgen. All right, so this was about the adrenal cortex. Let's talk about the catecholamines or the adrenaline, noradrenaline. So catecholamines are also known as emergency hormones because they are responsible for flight and fight response. What are they responsible for? Flight and fight response. Now, what is this response? For example, you are running and behind you, you have a very mad dog and you are running and running. What things will take place at that time? Either you just stop and you fight with the dog, or you just fly. You take a flight and you run away. So at that time, your body will send a mechanism wherein, adrenal medulla will secrete some hormones which are adrenaline, noradrenaline. And adrenaline and noradrenaline, they will, causes a lot of changes in your body. First of all, it will increase the alertness because you have, an enemy and you want to get alert. Then it will also dilate the pupil so that more light rays will enter into the eye and the image form is exactly clear. Second, it will increase the strength of muscle so you can run. So whenever you run, there is increase in heart rate and there is increase in breathing rate. Why there is increase in breathing rate? Because you want more oxygen to enter. Then also one thing that will happen that time, during fear, you get, dry mouth, right? So it will inhibit salivation. That's why you have dry mouth or digestive glands. It will inhibit the digestive glands as well. So these are some of the effects that adrenaline shows in your body, and this all mechanism is there so that you could get protected. You get protected from the enemy, right? So this is about the adrenal gland. So let's talk about the disorders of adrenal gland. So the first very important disorder that you need to do is Addison's disease. Addison's disease, it's very important. In this disease, there is decrease in mineralo and glucocorticoid. All right. So what happened in this disease is there is decrease in blood sodium ion because you don't have mineralocorticoid, increase in blood potassium ion. There is a bronze-like pigmentation on skin. There is decrease in RBCs as well in some cases. Okay, and vomiting, diarrhea, these can take place because there is decrease in mineralocorticoid. So that's why there will be no reabsorption of sodium ion. So blood sodium will drop and blood potassium will increase. So this is one disease. Second is Cushing disease or Cushing syndrome. Cushing syndrome occurs when there is when there is increase in gluco. So when there is increase in the cortisol levels, right? So these are the two important you need to remember in the disorder. All right, moving further to the next gland, that's pancreas. As you all know, pancreas is the heterocrine or composite gland. That means it will be having both the parts. What are these? One is the exocrine part and another is the endocrine part. Endocrine part, it's around 1%, whereas 99% is exocrine. Exocrine part is known as echini and it will secrete digestive enzyme or digestive juices. Whereas the endocrine is known as islets of Langerhans, and this will secrete hormones. So if you see the dissection, or you do the dissection and you see the section of your pancreas, what you will see? You will see there are certain flower shaped bodies, the large flower shape, these are echini. These are many and they will secrete enzymes. And in between them are present some clusters of cell known as islets, not island, it's islets of Langerhans, right? So that's echini, and singular is echinus, and these are islets. So islets have different types of cells, like I'm drawing it in the different colors so that you can, that makes more sense to you. So one type of cell are alpha cell, another are beta cell, and third category is of delta cell. And these are the islets, right? So let's talk about these alpha cell. Alpha cells secrete hormone glucagon. The function of glucagon is to increase blood sugar, and anything that increases blood sugar is hyperglycemic. What is it? It's hyperglycemic. All right. So how does it increases blood sugar? First, by glycogenolysis. What is glycogenolysis? Breakdown of glycogen. Breakdown of glycogen into glucose. Then gluconeogenesis, that we have discussed. It will lead to the synthesis of glucose, not from glycogen, from lactic acid, from lipid, from amino acid, right? Then we have another set of cells which are your beta cells, and beta cells secrete insulin, and insulin is hypoglycemic hormone. That means it will decrease blood glucose. So how does it decreases blood glucose? By glycogenesis. What is glycogenesis? Formation of glycogen from glucose. Formation of glycogen from glucose. That's your glycogenesis. Then we have another cells which are known as delta cells. I'm writing here delta cells. Delta cells secrete somatostatin. Somatostatin inhibits alpha and beta cell and gut motility. Inhibit alpha and beta cell. Also they inhibit gut secretion and motility. One important function that glucagon does it also decreases uptake of glucose by cells, right? It decreases cellular uptake of glucose. If the cells are not taking glucose, the glucose will accumulate in the blood, and this will lead to the increase in blood sugar level, right? So the disease that is associated with the pancreas is diabetes mellitus. So what happened in diabetes mellitus? Increase in blood sugar. Why? Due to decrease in insulin. Right? So that's the disorder. So what's the symptom of diabetes? The person will have excessive urination, it will have high blood sugar levels and excessive thirst. These are the symptoms of your diabetes mellitus. So that's the pancreas. Let's talk about testes and ovaries. Testes and ovaries, these are collectively known as gonads. What do you call them as? Gonads. So let's talk about the ovaries first. As I'm a female, so I will discuss ovaries. So in ovaries, we have structure known as Graafian or mature follicle. These Graafian follicles or mature follicles are formed from immature follicles under the influence of FSH. So these follicles, these are the rich source of estrogen. And estrogen, it controls secondary sexual characters. So the hormone secreted by these follicles is estrogen, and estrogen, it controls the secondary sexual character. What are secondary sexual characters? Like you all know, the females have high pitch voice, like I have. I have a very high pitch voice. So this is controlled by the estrogen. So what is the function of estrogen? Development of breast high pitch voice, development of sex organs, etc. All right. So all these functions that makes a female, uh, and different from the male as well, so these all are controlled by the estrogen. Also, estrogen increases the level of LH that later uh, you know uh, causes ovulation. Then after ovulation, this Graafian follicle, for example, the ovulation took place, there is rupture of the Graafian follicle, and this will, what happen is, how does a follicle look like? First of all, it has this queen cell known as oocyte, which is surrounded by a lot of follicular cells. So this is how it looks like. So when it ruptures, the rest over forms the corpus luteum, and this oocyte, which will then become ovum, it it gets released out. So after ovulation, the ovum, it gets released out, whereas the leftover of the follicular cell becomes corpus luteum. This corpus luteum is a rich source of progesterone, and progesterone is very important hormone, as it is the main pregnancy hormone. Why it is known as a main pregnancy hormone? Because it maintain endometrium. Now what is this endometrium? It is the inner lining of uterus that sheds off every month in a female during periods or menstruation, right? So this is the endometrium in which the embryo gets embedded during pregnancy. That's why in a pregnant female, menstruation does not occur. Okay. So this hormone, it will keep on maintaining it so that it will not shed off and abortion should not take place. Also, it leads to the development of alveoli in mammary glands. Mammary glands or breast have a secretory structure in which milk is formed. That's alveoli. Alveoli are also present in lungs, and they're also present in the mammary glands. All right. So that's a function of the ovaries. Let's talk about the males now. That's testes. In testes, there are cells present known as Leydig cells or interstitial cells. On stimulation by LH, on stimulation by LH, these cells secrete androgen, that's testosterone. What's the function of testosterone? It also controls secondary sexual characters. Secondary sexual characters. Now, what are these secondary sexual characters? Like high pitch voice. Males have deep voice, females have, low pitch voice. Males have low pitch voice, and females have high pitch voice, right? And also, if you can see, the males have, broad shoulders, they broader shoulders, and also males have, more strength because they have, muscle growth of muscles takes place with the help of testosterone. Also, development of sex organs and genital. Also, libido. What's the libido? Libido is sex drive or sexual drive. All right. So these are the functions of testosterone, and those were the function of the estrogen and progesterone. So FSH, they are known as gonadotropin. Why they're known as gonadotropin? Because they're doing the growth of gonads. And later on, then the gonads from the whatever function they are performing, like in female, estrogen and progesterone are secreted, and in the male, the androgen or testosterone is secreted. Fine. Moving further to the classification of hormones. All right. So before that, before classification, let's discuss some other hormones of the other body parts, right? So beside a main major gland, some cluster of cells also secrete hormones. For example, ANF in the heart. ANF in the heart, heart's atria. So it's secreted by heart's atria, and what is its function? It inhibit ADH. It also inhibits RAS system and it causes vasodilation, right? So likewise, in our gut, we have other hormones like gastrin. Gastrin is a hormone that comes from G cells of stomach. And these hormones have very important function to perform. What's that? It increases gastric secretions. So whatever enzyme these stomach is secreting, it's due to gastrin hormone. Increases gastric secretion and motility. And motility. Just like that, also we have in the duodenum that secretin. Secretin is secreted by duodenum of gut, and the function is secretion of pancreatic enzyme. So it will tell the pancreas to secrete the enzymes and secretion of bile from liver. So bile is something that leads to emulsification of fat. It leads to emulsification of fat or fat chopping, right? So that's secreted by liver, and on which call? On the call from secretin. Okay. Now there is another hormone known as CCK. CCK's full form is cholecystokinin. This is also the hormone secreted by duodenum, and its function is release of bile. So bile is secreted by liver, but it gets concentrated in the gallbladder. So CCK will lead to the release of bile by contracting the duct of gallbladder. All right. So which one is leads to the synthesis of bile? Secretion means synthesis. Synthesis of bile is done by secretin, whereas the release of bile, wherein from the gallbladder, it takes place with the help of CCK. Other than that is also present, or there is one hormone, erythropoietin. Erythropoietins come from JG cells, juxtaglomerular cells of your nephron, if you remember in excretion you have done. So these juxtaglomerular cells, they secrete erythropoietin, and the main function of this is erythropoiesis. It helps in erythropoiesis. Right? You must have done in the RAS system, renin, right? Then we have some other growth factors, right? So growth factors are secreted by some cells of your body like epithelial cells. The function of these cells is to stimulate adjacent cells. Stimulate adjacent cells for growth. For example, if you get a wound in the blood vessel, you get some wound, and the blood started oozing out, and when the wound occurs, there is a rupture of skin, but later on the skin heals itself and cover it up. So there must be some growth factor that tells these cell to grow, to multiply and cover it. So these are all growth factors which are secreted by some cells, and they stimulate the adjacent cells, so that leads to the growth of your body, growth or cell differentiation sometimes. Cell differentiation. So other than the main endocrine gland, so these are certain hormones. So all these were hormones, and they're from where they are coming and their function. Fine. So all those who doesn't know the full form of ANM, I'm writing here because I was assuming that you know the full form. So but just for those who have not read that chapter, that's atria natriuretic factor. All right. Okay. So this was all about it. So let's move further. Okay, moving further to classification of hormones. So this classification we are doing according to the chemical it is secreting. All right. So there are certain chemicals they are made up of. First of all, we have peptide or polypeptide or protein hormones. So this is a category of hormones. Either they are made up of chain of amino acid or multiple chains of amino acid or a protein. Fine. Then we have category where these are made up of steroids. And then we have category of amino acid derivative. They are derived from amino acids. And then we have iodinated hormones, where hormones have iodine. Hormones have iodine. Fine. So in the peptide or polypeptide or protein hormones, we have a lot of hormones like insulin, glucagon. Also, we have all the hypothalamic and pituitary hormones. In steroids, we have the hormones of gonads, like in female, we have estrogen, then we have progesterone, and we have corticoids like cortisol, and then in males, testosterone, the androgen. These all are made up of steroid. What are steroids? These are derived lipids. We have done them in the biomolecules. And then amino acid derivative like adrenaline, noradrenaline, melatonin. And iodinated, you all know, thyroxine. So now why we have classified them according to the chemicals? The reason is because that chemical decides how they are going to function on their target site. As we know, they are going to function of target site. That means the hormones, they are very specific in function. For example, as we have discussed, if this is the endocrine gland, if this is the endocrine gland, this is going to secrete the hormone. Okay. Now this hormone will travel through the blood and it will go to the target site. For example, the target site is any cell of your body. This is the target cell. Now on target cell, it is going to give message as they are messengers. So in the target cell, they are received by something. They are what? They are received by something, and these are known as receptors. Receptors are certain proteins. Now these receptor to which the to which the hormone binds on the target cell, they are known as receptors. What are they? Receptors. And these receptors can be present outside the cell or it can be present inside the cell. Right? So all the hormones which are not friends with lipids, they have extracellular or membrane bound receptors. Extracellular or membrane bound receptors. So these extracellular or membrane bound receptors are the receptors for which hormones? Which are lipid insoluble. Which are lipid insoluble, right? So in the last which we have done, these are lipid insoluble and these are lipid insoluble. Whereas steroids and iodinated hormones, they are lipid soluble because they can easily pass through the lipids. Here, because these are made up of lipids, that's why they can pass through lipids. And here, iodine helps the hormone to move, right? Like we have done, it will it will help the hormones to travel from colloid to the outside of the follicle. So these are also lipid soluble. Right? So these hormones which are lipid insoluble, they will be having the receptor which are present outside the cell, whereas the hormones which can directly enter the cell because they are lipid soluble, they will be having intracellular receptor. So these are lipid soluble hormones. So intracellular receptors are of two type. They can be present in the cytoplasm or they can also be present in the nucleus. So they can be cytoplasmic or nuclear receptor, out of which nuclear are the most common one. Alright, so that's why their function is different because their chemical nature is different. Let's see how do they work. Let's discuss the mechanism of hormone action. So guys, let's talk about the lipid solubles one first. So if any hormone is lipid soluble, as we have discussed, it can easily pass through the cell membrane. If this is the cell membrane, The hormone, if this is you have hormone, any just take example of any steroid hormone like estrogen. So before understanding the mechanism, let's talk about the function of estrogen. One function of estrogen, it leads to the growth of endometrium. Okay, the endometrium is maintained by progesterone, but the cells of endometrium, they are divided or they're differentiated with the help of estrogen as well. So one function is tissue differentiation of estrogen. So how this hormone, which is a primary messenger, it's going to give this cell of uterus, if this is a cell membrane of uterine cell, how it is telling the uterine cell to undergo differentiation. Let's see. So as I've told you, this is lipid soluble, so it can easily pass through the cell membrane, and then it will enter the nucleus. This is nucleus, and inside the nucleus it has someone to receive it, and these are known as receptors. So here this is received by receptor, and what will be formed? Hormone receptor complex. So here hormone receptor complex will be formed. Now this hormone receptor complex, it is going to bind with the DNA or the genes. Okay, so it is going to bind to the DNA or the gene, and it will alter the function of DNA or chromosome or gene. Now it will tell that DNA or gene to produce some proteins, that will lead to the tissue differentiation. So it will tell the DNA, start your transcription and translation. So it will form the mRNA by what? By transcription. And then mRNA will form protein by translation. Protein by translation. Okay, and this protein will lead to cell or tissue differentiation. Cell or tissue differentiation. Okay. Now, if someone asks you how do the lipid soluble work, they work by entering directly into the cell, and they bind to the nuclear receptor. And what do? They will alter. What are these? These are lipid soluble hormone. They will alter the gene expression or chromosome function or chromosome function. Okay, so their function is different. They will directly tell them what to do. Okay, the function of lipid insoluble is little tricky, since they are not allowed to enter. So their receptor is present outside. So this is their receptor. Okay, so here when the hormone will bind, again what will be formed? Hormone receptor complex. Hormone receptor complex will be formed, and this hormone receptor complex will generate the first response element, and this response one will lead to generation of second messenger, because first or the primary messenger, which is hormone, it cannot enter inside the cell, so it needs its another half, which will send message inside of the cell. Okay, and these secondary messengers are calcium ion, CAMP, IP3. CAMP is cyclic adenosine monophosphate, whereas IP3 is inositol triphosphate. Okay, so what was the response element? Response element was any enzyme, like for example the hormone receptor complex formation, it leads to the activation of certain enzyme, and these enzyme leads to the generation of second messenger. These second messenger will then, it will show cascade of reaction, which will lead to biochemical response, and then which will lead to physiological response. For example, I give you a very simple example. One function of adrenaline is to increase blood sugar. If I'm using the hormone adrenaline, its one function is to increase blood sugar. What it will do is it will bind and form hormone receptor complex, and it will generate one enzyme. This enzyme will form CMP. This CMP later on, it will activate an enzyme, and this enzyme will lead to formation of glucose from glycogen, and this glucose will then enter in blood and blood sugar will increase. So this is how they function. So in a way, they need to have one second messenger, and second messenger can be anything. For example, I gave you example of adrenaline. Adrenaline functions by CMP. Other hormones will work accordingly. Fine. So this was it about the mechanism of action of hormones. Let's do some questions. Dash acts mainly at the kidney and stimulate resorption of water and electrolytes by the distal tubules, and thereby reduces loss of water through urine. So out of all the hormones written here, we have discussed. What was ANF? Atrial natriuretic factor. So it was working opposite to ADH. So this is not the one. Whereas ADH was the one which leads to reabsorption of sodium ions and water. So answer is 3. GH is growth hormone, guy. Okay. Next we have, which of the following statement is incorrect with respect to melatonin hormone? Melatonin shows diurnal variation. It shows antigonadal hormone secreted by pineal body synthesized from tyrosine amino acid. Okay. So yes, it shows diurnal variation because when there is light, it gets inhibited. It is antigonadal, true. So that's the new point you have to add there. It also inhibits the gonadal activity. Anyone who has increased melatonin during puberty, right, the puberty will be delayed. Why? Because it inhibits the gonads for its function. And yes, it is secreted by pineal body or pineal gland, but it is not a derivative of tyrosine. Tyrosine's derivative what was adrenaline and the thyroxine, but it is derived from tryptophan. Tryptophan hormone. All right. Okay. Okay. All right. Next question. Which hormone has a calorigenic effect in the body? What is a calorigenic effect? That means depletion, or burning of the calories to make energy. So that's a function of your metabolism. So which hormone was increasing your metabolism? That was thyroxine. So answer is 2. So some things are interrelated. You need to make your mind that's not difficult. Okay, some of you must have disturbed, ma'am, you have not tell calorigenic effect, right? So you need to understand, you know everything. Whenever you are reading question, just make your mind that you know everything. You just have to deduce it. For example, calorigenic means burning of calories, and burning of calories is a function of metabolism. So the answer is 2, thyroxine. After ovulation, the ruptured follicle is converted to a structure called corpus luteum, which secretes mainly FSH is secreted by anterior pituitary. Progesterone is the hormone of corpus luteum, whereas estrogen is secreted by mature or Graafian follicle. Whereas LH is also the AP, that means anterior pituitary's hormone. Answer is 2. Next question. All hormones are steroids except estrogen is a steroid, progesterone, cortisol is a corticoid, whereas FSH is a proteinaceous hormone. So answer is 4. Next. Which of the following stimulates the pancreatic secretion? Gastrin, it stimulates the gastric secretion. VIP's vasointestinal peptide. That's the hormone of intestine that leads to absorption of water. So it has nothing to do with pancreas. Secretin is the answer. ANF, it inhibits ADH. You have done this in the excretion. So answer is 2. Next. That's it. So this was all about your chapter chemical control and coordination. It's quite simple. So don't worry, just learn it and get good marks. That's all I wanted and that's all I wish for all of my students. All the best.